Did you know that cowboy boots originally had that really pointed toe to make it easier to slide your foot in and out of the stirrups of a saddle? Kind of interesting, right? Well then, what are these for? What is this? So today we're gonna cut them in half to figure out how they built this toe, what it's for, where it came from, and show you guys some interesting facts about crocodile leather that I bet you didn't know. And thanks to Victoria Cast Iron for sponsoring this video. They were established in 1939 in Medellin, Colombia, and they're still made in Colombia by the same family. It's a 3-generation family company, and they're seasoned with European kosher certified flaxseed oil, and they're the only manufacturer at this price point that actually uses flaxseed oil, which is considered to be the best base layer for seasoning a cast iron. And they strive to create each piece that joins innovation and tradition, because if you don't know anything about cast iron, it's basically the heritage boots of the pots and pans world. You have to take care of them, but they last you a lot longer, and there's some really interesting benefits. And the cool thing about Victoria is they produce their own cast iron in their own factory. They don't outsource any of their casting, and they use the most advanced Danish sand casting machinery and techniques, and all their products have a lifetime warranty on their craftsmanship. So if you don't know anything about cast iron, I have a feeling if you like this channel, you're gonna like cast iron stuff. So be sure to check them out via the link in my description, and thanks again to Victoria Cast Iron for sponsoring this video. So first, what are these boots? I've seen people wearing these boots on occasion from time to time, and I'm absolutely perplexed by why anyone would wear these. They can't be that functional, they can't be that comfortable. Why would anyone want to wear them? But then I thought about it, I'm like, well, that's probably what the guys that wear these boots think about the Yeezys that we've been cutting apart lately, in the same way that the people that wear Yeezys think about the heritage boot guys. And so ultimately, I think this is just basically the Yeezy of the Mexican cowboy boot world. And historically, Mexican cowboy boots were always more pointy than their Northern American counterparts, at least from my perspective, because I remember even as a kid going to the Ute Stampede Rodeo and seeing some pretty wild Mexican boots with their shirts all fringed up and the toe of the boot all pointed up and bedazzled to the max. So for me, Mexican cowboy style has always been a little bit over the top. But things really got out of hand in the 2000s, and I'm not talking about the scary assassins in Breaking Bad with the skull on the end of their toe, kind of like these. I'm talking about these with the super exaggerated long pointy toe that was like 4 feet long. And according to Vice, the Mexican pointy boots, or the tribal. How do you say tribal? Tribal? Cool. According to Vice, the Mexican pointy boots, or the tribal boots, they were worn ironically by the lovers of the tribal music, tribal music scene, which is a traditional Mexican music fueled by techno beats. It's quite the music. We'll put a sample over this part of the video. And it started out with people altering their cowboy boots to have a little bit pointier toe, a little bit longer toe, and then it turned into a competition between towns and different groups of people and different dance crews, and they just made them pointier and pointier and longer, and they'd use homemade, they do it from home with garden hoses. The pros would make it out of shaped foam and fiberglass, and it got to the point where it started to bleed into a little bit of more pop culture. And it got to the point where CDG featured a pair of these, or a similar pair of those super long pointy boots, in their 2015 catalog for $500+. So I don't really know if they made this pointy of shoes before that big trend that just skyrocketed and it immediately dropped off. I don't know if this is a product of that, just kind of settling back down to a norm where some people would be willing to wear these out in public, or did they always make these boots and they just have been a trend that's under the radar? Because I feel like I remember seeing people wearing this ridiculous of boots when I was a kid, when I'd go to the rodeo. But also as a kid, and everything seems bigger when you're a kid compared to when you're an adult. But that Vice documentary does a really interesting dive into how fast style can quickly evolve to get completely out of hand and ridiculous, especially in these small subcultures and regions. Also how immediately it'll just crash and just go away. So long story short, there's really no purpose to this except for the style, the form of it. And as for the leather of this boot, you'll notice it's pretty clearly crocodile leather of some kind that runs along the toe. And one way to tell if it's actual real crocodile skin and not fake is if it has these 3-dimensional bends and patterns inside the leather, it's usually real crocodile. If it's super flat and it looks like someone could just emboss it into a piece of leather, it's usually fake. Because to try to fake this 3-dimensional shape and these little fins and the way that the leather tucks underneath, You could, and the way that it moves, more importantly, you could have someone tool that into a piece of cow hide, but it would take so much time and energy and talent to do it. It would just be way cheaper to use actual crocodile skin. So if it's three-dimensional like this, it's usually a real crocodile. And another interesting thing about crocodile leather is that they usually just use the bellies. A lot of people assume that it's the back of the crocodile, that's the scaly part, but those scales on the back of the crocodile are usually so hard that you can't tan them, you can't work with them, and especially in the older animals, you can't really use it as a leather. But you can use the back scales of younger crocodiles or caimans, smaller breeds of or species of crocodiles, because it's a little bit thinner flesh and it's a little bit more malleable. It tans easier, and that's exactly what this bit is. This looks like it's the tail of a caiman or a small crocodile. You can see the little scales going up. So that's it's kind of cool. It's also really weird and a little bit morbid that you've got a baby crocodile tail in the shape of a crocodile tail hanging off the end of your boot. And I don't have a ton of personal experience working with crocodile leather, but I've always loved some of the natural characteristics of it. Like, I love the way that these scales bend and flex just like it would on the live crocodile, how they tuck underneath of each other and shift and move. And it's crazy how tough crocodile leather can be. It's shockingly hard, especially on these big scale parts. Like, it's still malleable and flexible, but it feels like a really hard plastic, and it's almost impossible to pierce. You can do it, but it's a lot tougher than cowhide. And a lot of people assume that crocodile scales are just sitting on top of the flesh of the crocodile, that you could just peel one of these scales off, kind of like what you can do with a fish scale. But their actual skin grows in that pattern, and it has those little hooks, and it grows to the shape of the scales. It's just a top layer of hard organic material. And you can see in this cross section how all those fibers kind of follow the lines of the scale. And so it's not even that they grow new flesh, it's all just contoured. And that's why an alligator can flex its back and move its scales independently, and it can flex. Alligators are freaky animals. And the leather's even freakier, if we're being honest. But let's get these things cut in half and see what's on the inside of this boot and how they achieve this super ridiculously long toe. All right, we got it chopped, and this alligator boot put up quite the fight. That shank is ridiculous. So let's see what's inside. So the big question is, how do they make this toe? I thought for sure there's gonna be some sort of like toe shank in there, or like really reinforced like toe counter, or stuffed with something, or I don't know, just something in here. But the way that this is structured is it's just the materials sewn into the shape. So this toe structure is completely dependent upon these panels on the outside, giving it tension to keep that toe swept up like that. There's nothing else keeping that toe up. See how when I push that down, how it just flexes that crocodile leather and this fabric underneath? Every time you're flexing that foot, and you're flexing that toe down every single time, which causes a lot of tension on these different materials, especially this crocodile leather. And maybe not the one flaw, the biggest flaw with crocodile leather is it's really, really tough from the top down, but these connective tissues in between the scales, it just loops around, and it's a really fibrous and really loose and really stretchy piece of leather. And to this boot's credit, there is an extra long toe counter that runs, I don't know, about halfway down the toe. So that does give it some structure to the top of the toe to keep it from flattening out, but it doesn't really add much strength and structure to the sprung toe. Because ultimately, people are not buying these shoes for any other reason except for how it looks. And that's the whole point with the Yeezy series we just finished in April. And it's really interesting how all these different footwear trends follow the same path, no matter where they're at in the world, no matter how short-lived they are. They always follow this sharp rise, copycats pushing it to the extreme, and then a hard drop where people have got to the point where they're prioritizing form so far over function that it no longer becomes a useful and a utilitarian object. product. It's just strictly for style, and then it dies. And so this ended up being the perfect follow-up video to the April series, because it's essentially the same thing, just from a different part of the world. So the final question is it worth it? So for the $200 I bought these for, they seem to be fine. It seems to be built to the same quality that you see most of these Mexican-made boots in that $200 price range, unless the craftsmanship that goes into this is a lot more labor-intensive than I'm assuming. And Crocodile's leather is not that expensive, even though people think it is.
Let's put a dead animal on you. Croc skin.
So let me know what you guys think. And this is kind of us dipping our toes in the cowboy boot world, because I'd like to do a cowboy boot series at some point. And so depending on the success of this video will kind of help us figure out when we're gonna do that and if we're gonna do it. So if you like this video and you wanna see the cowboy boot series, be sure to do the pleading trifecta of YouTube. And let me know which cowboy boot brands you'd like to see in that series, because there's so many. And I'm not that involved in the cowboy boot world to know which ones to do. So thanks for watching, and thanks for everything you guys do. Your support makes doing these boots feasible and kind of explore some of this more wild stuff. So thank you guys. See ya.